Welcome to the Planning Board. It's Monday, January 6, 2025 at 7 p.m. Please note that this meeting is being made available to the public through an audio recording, which will be used to ensure an accurate record of proceedings produced in the minutes of the meeting. All comments made in open session will be recorded. PAC TV is providing this service live on Comcast Xfinity Government Access. Channel 9, those without cable, visit YouTube for live streaming. We also have a board member participating remotely. Jim Noon is remote tonight and is participating via remote participation in accordance with the requirements of 940 CMR 29.10 via speakerphone due to personal illness, emergency, geographic distance, personal disability, military service. Not all of those, but one, geographic distance. And all votes during this meeting will be made via roll call. All right, we're beginning tonight's meeting with a public hearing. And this is public hearing number SP 5-24. This is continued from November 4th, 2024. The Towers LLC, doing business as the Towers BTS of Massachusetts and Salesforce Partnership, doing business as Verizon Wireless. The applicant proposes to construct and operate a wireless facility that Verizon Wireless will use, consisting of a 150-foot tall monopole tower supporting its antennas and radio equipment, with additional support equipment on the ground adjacent to the tower. The tower and ground compound are designed to allow co-location by other wireless carriers as well. The monopole tower and Verizon Wireless ground equipment will be within a 41-foot by 68-foot fenced enclosure on the property. The property is located at 720 Washington Street, Pembroke, in Business B and Residential District A, as shown on Assessor's Map F9, Lot 9A1. All right.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Michael Chimo, Robinson & Cole, representing the applicant. So when we were here the last time, we were sent away with a few questions. One was some questions about the radio frequency coverage gap, the coverage gap, the need for the site, where the antennas would be located externally. We were also we're about to schedule and did schedule a balloon float, which occurred, and we've got photo sims which were distributed just tonight to you. At the last meeting, we had hoped to have revised plans. We heard the message that the board wanted us to push that compound back from the wetlands. It has been redesigned to do that, but the plans haven't received final sign-off from the applicant yet, so I can't present them tonight. We do expect to have those signed off, in hopefully by the next time we get together. But we were able to push it out of the 50-foot wetland setback. Because of that, the stormwater design is going to be a little bit different, and that will be, Jesse is here tonight, and he will be able to provide a report on that when the new plans are submitted.
Great.
Okay. I'd like to, rather than me talking tonight, I'd like to have Keith Valenti, who's our RF engineer for C Squared, which consults to the applicant on this site, explain the technical questions.
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Keith Valenti with C Squared Systems. Business address is 65 Dartmouth Drive in Auburn, New Hampshire. We prepared the RF report that's in the package that explains the need for the site and how it fits within Verizon's network. The report's dated October 14th of last year. So the report itself explains a number of provide some general background on Verizon's network in the area of Pembroke, and essentially demonstrates how the proposed site fits within that network from a coverage and capacity standpoint. Within that report, at the end, there are a number of maps. Those are generally most helpful to kind of visually understand what's going on. So what I have here are just large scale printouts of those maps. but they are the same ones that are in the package. So what we have here is attachment A, and what this shows is Verizon's coverage from some of the surrounding sites in the area. It includes sites that are off the map, but we've zoomed in to focus on the area around the proposed site. So just quickly to introduce these locations, the site locations are shown by the sets of 3 wedges, which each wedge demonstrates represents a sector of a site. Most sites have 3 or 4 sectors of antennas to cover all around them. So that's what you see here. The existing sites are shown in the black. So to the left, just to start here, there's a site labeled Pembroke. That's at R&R Marine. It's a monopole tower similar to what's proposed here. On the north end of the map is a site labeled Pembroke North. That's at the fire company in town, also a monopole. On the east side of the map, just by Route 3 and Franklin Street, it's another monopole that Verizon is co-located on. And on the southern portion of the map, a site labeled Pembroke South, which is on a Sweetwater Acres Farm, I believe is what it's called, also a monopole. And in the center in blue is the subject site labeled Pembroke 4. So Verizon operates their network. They have FCC licenses to operate in multiple frequency bands. To the user, they transmit and provide LTE 4G service across multiple frequency bands. To the user, that's more or less transparent. But from Verizon's standpoint, a coverage perspective, the frequencies that are used cover different ranges effectively. It's just based on the physics of it. Lower frequencies tend to have broader, more range of coverage. So what we're showing here is their lower band, the kind of the best case scenario. It's their 700 megahertz coverage. And what this shows is the coverage from those surrounding sites. The green is in the coverage key is here. It's in signal strength levels. But effectively what Verizon's striving for is basically yellow and green is adequate for an area such as this. Gray is kind of, a little iffy. You're getting a little, not reliable anymore. And then white, it's just a deeper coverage gap. So you can see as you move away from the sites that are turned on here, the existing sites, as you get further away, these gaps become more pronounced. And then really in the center of the map is the area that's intended to be addressed by the subject site. It impacts Route 53 Washington Street, Route 14 Congress Street, High Street through town, and all any businesses, residences along those roadways. If I can flip to the next map. This is basically that first map, except now we've turned on the proposed site. At the proposed height for Verizon's antenna is 145 feet. You can see that it fills in a large portion of the gap. These irregular coverage areas are predominantly defined by the topography of the area. Any sorts of hills and valleys are going to prevent the site from covering beyond. Vegetation, tree cover, that also attenuates the signals. So that's what creates these unique kind of coverage patterns from these surrounding sites. But in the report itself, there are, I think it's section 7, we provide some data in terms of, what does this mean, other than the area that's that it's providing coverage for. So in terms of population, we're calculating about 1,300 residents that, previously did not have reliable service that would now have service from the proposed site. About 600 structures, in the way that structure database is defined is it's 150 square foot. So it could be, it's generally a home, but it could also be a shed, if it's big enough. So it's just really that number just gives a little perspective in terms of what the site does. In terms of distances, we're showing 9/10 of a mile on Congress Street, 0.3 miles on Route 53. That's new coverage at this NIG 95 level or better. Old Washington Street, about a mile. High Street is also approximately 0.9 miles as well. So it provides a substantial, additional coverage in the area of town. The next set of maps I can go through just briefly, but as I introduced, Verizon operates at multiple frequency bands. This is a higher frequency band that they use to deploy the same service. It's more intended to, handle additional capacity. But because of this higher coverage frequency of 2100 megahertz, the coverage range just isn't as good, and that's why it's important to use both frequency bands to provide a more robust network. So the gaps here are quite more noticeable and larger. And likewise, the coverage from the proposed site, doesn't quite match what it does at the lower frequency band. But this coverage is extremely important to manage, users on the network. Users closer to these sites, they may be directed to use the higher band of coverage because the coverage is adequate to support their usage. And it's more of a balancing act of different resources and how to manage where the users are they in strong areas or in further off areas. And that's all done behind the scenes, transparent to the users. The next set of maps, now I'm on attachment E here again. Again, these are all in the report that was provided. What we first showed there was just sort of a raw coverage need for the site, how bringing new coverage to the area. With the usage on the networks these days, I mean, as I'm sure you all know, many people have multiple devices, many homes have completely cut the cord. So the usage on these networks is growing very aggressively. So one of the more challenging aspects of network design is to maintain, to be able to support all that usage. So what we're showing here is, again, this is existing coverage without the proposed site turned on, but we've color-coded the different sectors to show what they're covering in terms of, if a user was located in this orange area, it's most likely to be using resources from this Duxbury 2 site. Likewise, down on Washington Street and towards where the site is located, it's coming off that fire company tower. So these sites are providing some degree of coverage in the area. The further towards the edge of these footprints, it's less reliable. But the fact is that still uses network resources on these sites and kind of steals it from where it could be used elsewhere. So the other need for this site is from a capacity standpoint. And what we're showing here in green is what the proposed site would cover. And what this does is it kind of allows those surrounding sectors to relax where they cover. They can dedicate more of their resources to cover the users located closer to them. And now we have a new site that can provide primary service for the users located closer to it. So it kind of allows, it's sort of a domino improvement. It just allows all the sites around it to perform better as well. The last map in the report, this I think can be helpful to explain those kind of irregular coverage patterns where the site is. So again, we have the terrain key that's above mean sea level. So the proposed site itself is at roughly 80 feet AMSL. To the south, you have these kind of higher elevations up towards 120, 150 feet. And looking north, it's generally mainly flat as far as this area goes.
And so that would dictate the height of the pole?
Yeah, so one of the primary reasons for the proposed height, as you can see if you look to the southeast and then to the southwest, you have these higher terrain areas. So this is where the height at a proposed site is critical because it allows you to kind of see a little better over those obstructions. And then, so these peaks here hit about 115 feet or so AMSL. There are also trees. The trees in this area are estimated to be about 70 feet. So you've already lost, relative to the proposed site, we're already down 35 feet. Throw a 70-foot tree on top of that, now you're at 105. So we're still above those trees, but now we got to see down as it goes over the hill, and that's where the challenge is. That creates a shadowing effect where height is more critical. Now, if we look at the hill out here, it's not going to matter what this is because this is so far away. It's really where that obstruction is relative to the tower. The closer it is, the more beneficial or improvement you'll see from height. But if it's further off in the distance, just the angle to it, it's just further off, so you can grow 200 feet. It's not going to really matter. It's that obstruction.
So you expect better coverage west of the pole?
Where the height is going to be critical is to the east along Congress Street, and then to the west, kind of in this area along High Street. And what I can show, this is not in the report. We prepared it to help because I knew this was one of the questions that might come up. This shows the degree of signal strength improvement, just between 145 feet and 125 feet. So what we're showing here, and it kind of highlights where those differences are. There's some spots here where we're at risk of losing 4 to 6 dB by dropping 20 feet. Doesn't mean it's unusable. It's just it creates more of a concern in terms of reliable coverage.
Sure.
And then certainly for anyone co-locating below, the impact would be that much greater. So.
Can you go back to the one, like two back?
Yep.
Uh,
Just one more.
That one?
Yep.
So the tower in the middle, the proposed tower?
Mhm.
So that green area is the coverage area after it's turned on?
This is called we call it a sector footprint. It's a best server. So we've relaxed that reliable signal strength threshold. So areas out here may not necessarily be reliable, but odds are users located here would be able to connect to the network, use those resources, make an emergency call if needed. This is intended to demonstrate, the area of users that would be served by the proposed site. So toggling back to the prior map, if you look at these surrounding
Yeah.
sectors that are highlighted, they're much larger. They're kind of overreaching
Yeah.
into this area. So, a benefit in addition to the improved coverage and bringing reliable coverage to the area is that it also allows better capacity management on the network.
So why is there so much more capacity on the proposed network than the surrounding networks
Well,
in this picture?
probably because to avoid it looking like we stepped on a Easter egg, all three sectors are shown in green here, whereas these are
Oh,
individual
okay. Yeah,
sectors. So
it's just
it's
the one
not
spacing.
necessarily a one-to-one.
Okay.
It's a little.
And the pole up at 85 Washington Street's only at 107 feet.
That
They-
one's
That one's
further
not
up
on the map.
north. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, off the map. That's I think it's 110 feet.
110.
Mm-hmm. So that's a rundown of the coverage maps in the report. I didn't know if there are further questions that folks had. I'm happy to answer them.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay.
So this is all still with external antennas?
Correct.
So, like, my question is, what would it look like with internal antennas? Because, like, the photos that we got in the balloon test, the visuals with the antennas, like, that to me is not aesthetically pleasing. The cell phone tower up, that's off the map, the new one, up at 139 Circle Furniture, like, that's a very reasonable installation to me. Like, it's not awful to look at. It serves its purpose. So, like, my question is, like, what would that implementation look like here?
From the coverage maps, you probably wouldn't notice much of a difference. I
Okay.
think the real difference here is from an operational and design standpoint. The standard design that Verizon uses is what's proposed here.
But the
I
one up
can't
at,
recall the details of this. My recollection is it had to do with historic restrictions and certain concessions were made. It's a shorter tower. And at some point, someone made that decision that they were willing to make a concession at that site. Here, it's a taller tower. It's covering, I don't have a comparison to show the different coverage areas. So I don't know if this covers much more or what the differences in
yeah,
terms of
can
population.
a tower with internal antennas be at this height?
At this height, well.
Like, I know the one up in North Pembroke is a little bit,
Yeah.
they reduced the height, I think, 10 feet over the planning process. Can this be at the same height, but just have internal antennas?
Same
Like
height here with
yeah.
internal antennas?
Yes.
So.
It isn't the height of the tower I had a problem with.
Yeah, understood. So one of there's always going to be a trade-off, right? So with the concealed monopole is what we'll term it, with the internal antennas, the perceived benefit from a visual perspective, it doesn't come for free. There are, design and performance drawbacks to that. So when the way the site is designed now is you have a platform with Verizon has 3 or 4 antennas per sector. So 4 sectors, 4 sectors, 3 antennas.
So four tiers.
No, on
3
one
tiers.
single array,
Yeah.
so Verizon would have 12 total antennas
Yeah.
at the same height.
Yeah,
By reducing that down to enclosing them,
sure.
you would, to maintain that number of antennas, you would have to take up 4 slots. That's a little
Yeah.
impractical. At the site up at Circle Furniture, I believe Verizon is taking the top 2 slots. So at a minimum, to use that similar design, the pole would have to be increased.
Or you'd lose the ability to have the number of antennas.
Yeah, to
So the
maintain
same size
this.
pole would give you less effective coverage, is what you're saying?
Yes.
With internal antennas?
Yes, it would, yes. And then I think it's important to note, the design of the site as it is today, it uses remote radio heads. So this is a kind of a transition from older technology. It's quite old now, but Verizon's been doing this for probably 10 years at this point. Is at the base station where once upon a time there were these large shelters with coaxial cables running up the tower. Now there's equipment at the base, and there's fiber optic cables running up the tower, much smaller. And then up around the antennas are remote radio heads. So that's where the fiber connects. And then they have jumpers. So instead of these larger 1 5/8" coaxial cables, in this case there would be upwards of 36 of them going up the tower. There's strands of fiber, very thin, and at the top you have the jumpers going to the antennas. So that's a performance improvement. You don't have, right off the bat, you don't have the signal loss in those coaxial cables. With the technology as it's advancing, it's using what's called MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. So it's not just sending one transmit, signal out there to keep up with all the capacity demands. Technological features with 4G and now 5G, they allow multiple transmit antennas kind of go into multiple users, and that creates a capacity improvement on the network.
So with them on the exterior, so say Verizon has the top tier, and then Verizon leases out lower tiers to, like, say, Comcast and Xfinity or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if Verizon would be the owner, but generally these towers have multiple tenants on them. If we're talking, your AT&Ts, your T-Mobiles, similar operators to Verizon, they're generally spaced at similar arrays, spaced at 10 feet apart.
So when you get into the one where it's all internal,
Yeah.
is it the same setup inside there, or is it?
It would be, again, to do a one-to-one comparison with the Circle Furniture, Verizon, if that design was used here, Verizon would take the top 2 slots,
Yeah.
Which is already a concession on what they're proposing here.
Right.
If carrier number 2 came in and they had similar requirements, which they likely do, they may want to take another 2 slots. So right there, you've lost, or you've used 40 feet of that tower for 2 operators instead of just the top 2 slots. So that's just one of the concessions. That's what I said. It doesn't come for free. It has to be consolidated, and then there are design concessions that can be made to accommodate it. They're just trade-offs.
But that's not really a coverage thing, that's a leasing. They're not
Well,
able to lease as much.
The lower the antennas go, it is a coverage impact. Everyone gets shifted
okay.
down. Yeah.
It's also a question of whether this site can be, sort of your last site in this area with multiple carriers on it, or if there's only going to be 2 carriers on this, and the next guy who shows up has to propose another tower someplace nearby.
Right.
So how many arrays are you planning right now?
Verizon is planning 1.
Well, how many are you requesting the town grant approval for?
It's designed for 4.
It's designed for 4.
Yeah.
So eventually
And the
that-
pictures we have 1.
Yes, because that's the only one that's committed at this point.
Yep.
Can we get a picture of what it would look like before?
Sure.
Okay. So why don't we, any other questions on this? So let's go to the visuals. So I think that tells a story here.
board members got to see this. Did most of you?
Live?
Live.
I don't know how many of us got to see it live, if any of us got to see it live, but.
But it was noticed, if people in neighborhoods wanted to see it, it said
Yeah,
that they could see it.
well, we did, and we also made sure we alerted everyone to it. Right, so there was notification to all the abutters.
Yes.
That the balloon test was happening. So we thank you for that, because I think that was helpful. But the pictures tell a story. So I don't know, if I look at this, I think that the most you're going to see this cell tower is if you're on Route 53 and you're going into this building, which is an industrial building. The visuals from Taylor Street, Congress Street, and when you consider that these were done on December 2nd, when there was no leaf cover,
Yeah, December 14th.
14th, okay.
Yeah, no leaves.
No leaves. I mean, I know the pictures are, it's hard for me to see how you would
Very minimal.
see this from the residential areas at all.
My only issue is with the 177 Taylor, it looks,
What is that?
that was the,
PT 18?
that's the font.
Yeah,
You know, that's,
And add 3 more layers.
well,
well, yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking.
still pretty far back.
Right, but I mean, that's definitely, to me, I mean, I'm just saying my opinion.
Whenever you have that much open land, it's gonna be easier to see something up that high.
Right, that's, I guess that's why I just wanted to see it before.
Yeah,
I mean, other than that, I don't see really.
And that, the farm there on Taylor Street, that's at a lower elevation, is it?
yeah.
I'm like trying to,
Wetland in there,
There
and
we go.
right, so that farm's at the lower, so you're seeing more of it, because you're not up on the hill of the higher elevations, right?
I don't know.
I'm not 100% sure, but
Okay.
That's the one that concerns me.
Yeah, but even the foreground is going to grow them.
but other than that, I don't think anyone will notice this once it goes up.
Yes, and remember that the guy who took these pictures tried to find the worst view. I mean, when the leaves are on, this will be hard to see from the street. He stayed in a public area. It will be visible from the field, but with the leaves on, again, there'll be some screening at least of that base that's not there now.
For 177 Taylor?
No,
Yes.
Oh.
Well, for 177 Taylor also, yes.
yeah,
No, not really.
somewhat, but not entirely. I mean, everywhere else, I mean,
Yeah.
once the trees are, have leaves on them, I don't think you'll see anything.
Yeah, I mean, from the industrial side, I have no,
And from 53, I mean, it is a residential commercial district. And I'm sure those businesses are depending on better service there, so.
There's a lot of new condos up in that area as well.
Well, that's Congress Street, yeah.
There are a lot more people on that section of the network.
Any other questions on the balloon test? Okay. Now, we are going to need to continue the public hearing.
Yes.
However, is there anyone who's come tonight who'd want to ask a question or two about the test or what we've reviewed here tonight? Okay, hearing none. So when's our next meeting is January 27th?
Correct.
Okay. Will you be prepared in time for January 27th? And will Merrill have a chance to do the peer review on the revised stormwater?
Depends on when I get it.
Okay,
I think we need to be ready for
okay,
February 10th?
okay, February 10th.
March
then.
3rd.
Well, or March 3rd. No, you have to schedule it. But we've got the two dates again, February 10th and March 3rd?
Yes.
Okay.
Could we put a placeholder on like March and then
Kick it that day
bump
to the
it
next
if we
one.
have to?
Well, we just open it and continue it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our engineering tells us we think we can do February 10th.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing till February 10th.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, we have a roll call vote. Heather?
Aye.
Dan?
Yes.
Alicia?
yes.
Jim? Jim? Oh, he's not here, we must have lost him. All right. Scott?
Aye.
And aye. All right. So we'll continue the public hearing until February 10th. Hi, Jim. Yep, we're here. Did you hear enough to vote on the continuation?
Yes,
Uh,
I'm voting aye.
uh,
What happened was the call dropped, so I've just been listening and I'm actually thinking I just called you back and able to vote.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So that'll be noted in the minutes. All right, so we'll see you on February.
Call dropped.
His call dropped.
Call drop. That
He needs a cell
was
tower.
perfect timing, Jim. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, next on our agenda. So this is an informal meeting with Joshua Lee Smith, partner from Bowditch and Dewey, and Robert Rice, lead project manager from National Grid. The discussion is on a potential zoning bylaw change for an overlay district to allow electric substation by special permit from the ZBA. The proposed location is 99/105 Mattakesett Street. There is no action required by the board on this. However, this could come up as a zoning bylaw change at the annual town meeting in the spring. So, thanks for coming.
Evening, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Joshua Lee Smith, I'm attorney with Bowditch and Dewey, representing National Grid in connection with this matter. With me, to my right, is Rob Rice, as you'd mentioned, Mr. Chair. Rob is the project manager in connection with this substation project. I promise to be brief, as it was advised that we meet informally with the planning board with respect to this matter. Give some highlights with respect to where we started in terms of this project and where we're looking to go, which is pretty, everything's time sensitive, of course, when it comes to public utilities. This site was part of a study which was conducted a few years back, referred to as the Hanover study. And that study revealed that a region or collection of towns, communities, including Pembroke and surrounding towns to the west of Pembroke, which is comprised of about 33,000 in terms of population. That this region required upgrades, essentially, with respect to its electric infrastructure and reliability. That was the general takeaway with respect to this study. In part, that is due to these communities, including Pembroke's growth and overcapacity with respect to the existing infrastructure that is servicing the community today. So the company acquired the property a few years back in anticipation of this infrastructure improvement. And as I'm speaking here, I'm assuming that you do have a copy of this brief slide deck. That's sort of the guide that I'm using here in my talking points. And I'll just advance to this map here. This is the project area. And one thing to note with respect to this project area, National Grid and Eversource, they all have different regions, different communities that they serve. This particular project area is right on the edge of National Grid and Eversource's shared service areas. And so it becomes vitally important to identify a location, a substation area that can be able to enhance and improve the electric infrastructure that exists today. What the company, and company meaning National Grid, but also Eversource utility companies, strive to do is to, when they're looking to either upgrade an existing substation or to build and install a new substation, to site those substations in close proximity to existing transmission line infrastructure or distribution line infrastructure, depending on whether it's a 115 kV or a 345 kV transmission line. As you can see here on this slide, this is a depiction of the site that we're proposing. And to the west, I believe that's to the west, or to the left, labeled here, you can see that's Eversource's transmission line that cuts through the property and cuts through a number of properties. So that is, it's about I believe it's about 150-foot wide right-of-way, and that's Eversource's transmission line row. So that's an ideal location for a new substation to be in which to be sited. And so, as depicted here, outlined in red, is the approximate footprint of what would be the substation. So that is supposed to depict the security fencing, approximately. The property itself, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, is it's made up of two parcels. It's 99 and 105 Massachusetts Road. The portion on the left is, as you can see, the proposed substation would be mostly located on the 99 Massachusetts Road parcel. The portion on the left contains the Eversource transmission line, which is why it needs to be more shifted to the right and avoid that 150-foot wide right-of-way. The challenge and issue that the company has with respect to actually building this is a zoning issue. So in the town of Pembroke, as I was engaged by the company and started to take a look at this property that the company already owned and purchased, we quickly identified that the town's zoning bylaw does not have any kind of a use category that covers this proposed use, in our opinion. Most communities, most cities and towns, in their use table, they have all different types of uses for different types of businesses and industrial uses, residential uses, as well as something that covers electrical substation types of uses or transmission lines. Oftentimes,
Public utilities.
public utility, essential services is another common one. Sometimes they just call out electric substation. Pembroke, the closest categories that we could find were things like solar facilities, which is, in our opinion, is not close enough. There is also another category which is actually not in your use table, but it's noted pertaining to renewable energy, which again, we don't feel comfortable permitting under that category. So we're left with a situation where you've got a local zoning bylaw with no use category in which we can come before the planning board or the zoning board and even seek relief. There's no path. The other thing is that in Pembroke, use variances are not allowed, which is quite common in a lot of communities. Use variances oftentimes are prohibited. So there literally is no way in which this can be accomplished, with the exception of a couple different paths. We prefer, of course, to go the local path, which is to work with the community, work with the planning board, the zoning board, if that applies, and the local officials to site this locally through zoning, working with, there'll have to be a building permit with respect to the small control building, et cetera. And the only way to do that locally is to do something like we're suggesting here, which is to request that the local planning board sponsor a zoning amendment. And that zoning amendment would essentially be the adoption of an overlay district that would, you can name it whatever you want, public utility overlay district, and it would encompass the entire lot. And one thing I will mention too is you may have noticed in the submission, the yellow lines, the vast majority of where the substation would be located is actually in one of your business districts. So Business District A is about 300 feet from the front lot line. It incorporates the Business A district. A small portion in the rear is within the Residential A district. So it's a split zone lot. The zoning amendment would would take this entire lot, everything in blue, and call that, let's call it Public Utility Overlay District. And within that overlay district, there'd be an amendment to your bylaw, which basically says that if you're in the Public Utility Overlay District, all of the uses that in the underlying district are otherwise allowed, but you also can, by virtue of a special permit, use the lot for substation use. And then beyond that, everything else would, all the dimensional requirements, all of the, if there's site plan review is required, which I think it would be, all of that still would apply. The only difference would be if the overlay is approved, then the substation use would be allowed by grant of a special permit. So we're certainly not asking that it be by right. We don't think that would be appropriate or fair. But we have done this in other communities where we do this by special permit. And I think, I mean, we'd have to work with you. You'd have to consider whether you'd want that special permit to be by the planning board or whether you'd want it to be by the ZBA. Sort of a local custom. We'd take your direction, Sue's direction, town council's direction on that. But that's essentially what we're requesting. The other alternative, so two big bucket alternate paths that we can take. One is that local option that I just described, creation of the overlay district, allowing for a special permit path. The other option is an option we don't want to take, in large part because it to some extent, it at least gives the perception that the local loses control. And it's essentially an override where the public utility company goes to the state, goes to the DPU and says, hey, look, we've got a time-sensitive project. This is an essential service and an absolute need and benefit for the public. We have to build this infrastructure, but there's no local zoning. So please give us an exemption from zoning. And the DPU would look at that and say, they would make us do an alternatives analysis. Was there another location that is in close proximity that National Grid owns or could own to build this infrastructure? And the easy part of the analysis by the DPU would be, is the zoning allowed? And clearly it's not. So that would be the other path. It's a long path. It's an expensive path, something that the company would prefer not to do.
It's almost as if you're doing it by eminent domain. It's not that, I get that.
Yeah.
But you'd be asking the state to not follow our zoning bylaws.
Exactly. Right.
When
So
you s-
I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions.
So is this red line, the actual station when you called it small? Is that what you're referring to? Isn't that, what is that, 200 by 400 square feet? Or 200 by 400?
I'm not sure what you're referring to when I said small.
The red
You said a
rectangle.
small.
I think a small-
Control building.
Oh, small control building, yes.
So
So
what
just
would-
to be clear, the red would be the security fencing. And within that, so within the red would be so security fencing securing the substation. Within that would be the substation yard. And within the substation yard would be, I'm sure you've seen a typical open air substation that has, it does have a control building. There'll be transformers, circuit breakers, open air equipment, all located within this red rectangle.
So as an example of something that size and scope is always helpful in these, because if we do allow this to go to town meeting floor, which it will, if we sponsor a bylaw change, people are going to want to see what it looks like and how it's going to be screened. That'll be of utmost concern to any abutters.
Right.
And it may be a very tough sell on town meeting floor. You do need a 2/3 vote, which is a hurdle. But I think the better prepared with visuals that would show people and what the alternative is. I mean, the alternative is, it may end up there anyway, even if we refuse the overlay district.
And the other thing is, I mean,
And at that
when
point.
it's replacing, I mean, right now it's a boarded up house.
Yeah, I
And
just
that's-
have one more question
Oh,
before I
sure.
forget. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you. So if you went the other route, you wouldn't be subject to any of our current zoning bylaws if you went that other route and had the state right?
That's generally correct.
So you wouldn't be subject to site plan approval.
That's right.
Okay. So with the overlay district, you'd be subject to site plan approval by the planning board. And as a part of what we do with site plan approval is screening, decommissioning. We also ask sometimes for decommissioning plans, if that happens at some point. There are other things that we can request and work with through site plan. If we don't have the ability to do site plan, we can't do that.
Yes.
So it's just something to consider.
Like, how close is that fence to the neighboring residents as well?
I mean, there's a Eversource transmission line in between it and the,
Well, substation and
Well-
transmission line are a big difference.
Well, that's the right of way for the overhead lines that
yeah.
go right through there.
But I mean, that's, we're not trying to figure out.
Yeah, Jim's
we're not
got
trying
a-
to figure
Jim's
out
got a
what the
question.
most- yeah.
Andy, we've always been told to stay away from spot zoning, and this looks like spot zoning. I'm just wondering if we'd be better off adding this use to residence A, so it's added to all uses, and then maybe specify that it needs a special permit and/or site plan approval.
Yeah, that may be another way to go about doing this. However, the overlay districts aren't always considered spot zoning, because we've got the overlay districts up in industrial A and B.
Yeah, and my other thought too is, we've got poles all over town, they're not in a lot of use either. So maybe that would take care of, tidy up a lot of stuff.
What did he say?
I couldn't,
Just talking about the poles that are used for utilities
yeah.
around town, they are in the road layout. I don't know how that works, honestly.
so,
I could speak to the overlay if you'd like.
just a kind of a question, is there a town around, since you kind of specialize in this, where the use tables you think are like really good?
Or is there a town that has this in their use tables that we could look at for reference?
Has this meaning
Yeah,
public utility use?
Well, use tables
Or
and then, and
substation.
how the overlay district would be worded.
Oh, yes. I can give you an example of a town where we did this exact thing.
Yeah.
Rehoboth is one.
where you did the overlay district.
We did the overlay district,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And so just with respect to the spot zoning, and he brings up a good point. There are two components to avoiding the spot zoning here. Number one is because it's an overlay district. That's one way to avoid spot zoning. So if we came in and said, well, we just want to change this lot to some other district, something other than residential A or business A,
Right.
and we just want to change it to, I don't know, industrial A,
Yeah,
that would be spot zoning.
Right.
But because we're maintaining the underlying districts and we're putting an overlay district on top of that, that avoids spot zoning. The other way to avoid spot zoning is with respect to the public purpose of this. This is for a public benefit, clearly. So that's the other component that we're comfortable that this would not rise to the level of spot zoning. The other point that the gentleman made, however, is a good one. And I did want to talk about this with the board in that there is another sort of subset alternative here, which could be that you could take your zoning bylaw and just say, in all districts, and I wouldn't probably isolate it to residential District A and Business A, but I'd probably say in all districts, allow a special permit mechanism for this public utility use. You could do that, and if we did that, we wouldn't even need the overlay.
Right.
But the reason why we presented this as an option first was because some communities don't want to have for example, in their Residence A districts, even the possibility of special permit for a public utility. So I guess I'd want your feedback on that, what you think would have greater odds of success at a town meeting. One thing that concerns me, Mr. Chair, is if you'd mentioned at town meeting, we need to somehow show this, how we're going to screen this. I'll tell you, in other communities where we've done this before, for the zone change, we usually don't have that level of detail at that time. Because it's not site plan review. We haven't yet, gone through the full engineering and design of how this is actually going to look and feel. We can show you generally where it's going to be located, but to provide things like photo sims and things like that, it's a little bit of ahead of ourselves. Now, every town and every community is different. If you think that that would be really necessary in order to inform the voters and allow them to be able to give an informed decision and would increase chances of success, we'll definitely do that. But at the same time, with all that being said, I wonder whether that option would be better versus doing or sort of a more blanket curative action with respect to your entire bylaw and just say, in all districts, you allow for a special permit. And then maybe the community will think, well, we entrust the planning board, we entrust the zoning board that if someone tries to put a substation in a location that's completely inappropriate, that they would just deny the special permit.
Right.
And then you'd almost be like running into the situation where we're showing a hypothetical building, what it's gonna look like with this screening and that screening. I mean, it could never happen, it could be completely different.
True.
I know some of the questions that homeowners would ask too would be, what is it gonna look like in general, for one, like we're saying, but does it create noise? How many cars are coming in and out? Does it cause any health concerns for neighbors? Because you're sitting in the middle of residential there as well.
Yeah.
So, what are
It's
those?
also, like,
Like, does it make noise?
And those are,
Is it gonna make the dogs
Tho-
bark?
those are good questions, and those are questions that usually we deal with more specifically through the zoning board, through the planning board. We can
Because
answer.
that sounded like a lawyer answer.
Well, we could change all this and it could still not get approved.
Right,
No,
well, no,
you
that's
don't
why
have
I'm just
zoning.
asking in general. Does a general site for a substation make noise?
The noise source for a substation comes from the transformers, generally speaking.
So it
So
does,
there
like,
does
so it's a high
No, they
frequency
hum.
or a hum?
No, but there can be a hum, but there's, even outside of zoning, so let's say that we decide to go the state route and get a zoning exemption, the company would still be subject to local plus state noise regulations. So it can never, the sound decibel level could never exceed a certain amount, especially if it's next to a residential property. And if it ever did, building commissioner could go the next day, go out with a sound meter and say, you're in violation, you go need to do something.
I don't think we're trying to special permit this right now. We're
Right.
trying
No,
to-
no, no, I'm
trying to
asking the
give it an
questions
avenue
before I
for
even,
special
like,
permit.
Right.
And
if
I'm
you
happy-
want me to vote
It's a
on,
perfectly
like,
good, yeah.
I want to know that information for health
But
concerns
we need
and
to land on a
neighbors.
square as to how we want to approach any kind of zoning change. And the fact that we don't have these uses identified anywhere in our zoning bylaw may be a problem that we want to solve. As opposed to an overlay district.
Eddie, if I could make another point, we already have a lot of what we consider the uses that are, I guess, in violation of zoning. We have transformers all over town. We have fiber slicks, which is where fiber optic cables connect any cabinet. Some of these are fairly big, they're like 8 by 8. There's a few several of those around town as well.
Yeah, but generally, we handle those during site plan or subdivision.
So, is the solar stuff considered public utility or?
Well, we have a separate bylaw for that.
Right, but I don't
entirely.
know if that's considered.
And it's very prescribed, so it's narrow.
Right.
And actually, thinking back on it, the town's pump station that we did there off Pleasant Street, that's in the Residence A.
Yeah.
It's kinda not proper.
Yeah.
So that probably should get covered too.
So it sounds like you're making,
Water towers.
so it sounds like you're making an argument for public utilities to be put into the overall bylaws.
I think so.
Okay,
Yes.
So I think it's some housekeeping we should do anyway.
yep.
so, to Jim's point, adding it to our existing bylaws, it sounds a little bit to me like we should identify where does it make sense to have these things. Like, I don't know that all of Residence A should allow a special permit.
Well,
for
that's
this.
where we would go with the uses
Yeah.
allowed in Residence A, Business B.
Business, right.
Business A,
Right,
so residential, commercial, so we'd have to land on that.
right. Would the footprint of this fit in the Business B district?
Well,
No.
I think
No.
it probably needs to be in all districts, because we have these facilities in all districts.
Right.
And you kind of need them in all districts.
You do.
Because
yeah.
residential is a big user of public utilities.
But I want, I just hate to see it so close to the homes. Like, I want,
Right.
if
Could
we
we
put
have
the
a
zoning
buffer?
in, it still has to have a great buffer
Yeah,
and,
but people don't like those wires being close to homes either.
The
but,
wires are already there.
Yeah.
but those substations,
Well, it depends on how you screen them. There's a lot of that goes in the site plan. I think what we need to do is we need to address the bylaw change.
Right.
but I think some of the setbacks, as well as making it spelled out in there, any of these utilities need to have X amount of setbacks from,
But all of that would
part of
default,
that bylaw.
it would default to the zoning, what's allowed in that zoning area. So if you allowed the public utility exemption, let's just call it that for a moment, in Residence A, you still have the same setbacks that you have for everything else in Residence A. The same setbacks that you have for everything else in Business A and Business B.
but like when we're in Business B, we say you have, in residences next to it, from a commercial building, it has to have greater setbacks.
Right.
So I think this should have greater setbacks as well.
Yeah, but okay.
Right, but
We
when,
could go down, we're not gonna write a bylaw here tonight.
Right.
So I think what we need to do, we have a meeting coming up on January 27th. We're going to address a number of bylaw issues at that meeting that we're proposing for the warrant. I think we need to have a discussion with town council on the both of these options here. I don't want to take the overlay district off the table entirely, but I think we need to consult with town council on the housekeeping with addressing the public utilities question in all of our zoning, because I was surprised it wasn't there. If you look at a lot of zoning bylaws in the surrounding towns, they do account for it in all of their zoning. So I think we need to do that. So that's what I would propose what we do. We don't need to take any action tonight on this. We've got time to do that. If we do decide, just so the public knows this, if we do decide to handle this through a bylaw, a zoning bylaw change, there will need to be public hearings where we explain this to folks before the town meeting. At those public hearings, we discuss the issues at hand. Sometimes we make a recommendation to support the zoning bylaw change. Sometimes we make recommendations not to, depending on how those hearings go. So a lot of information gets out to the public ahead of time and before we have town meeting. So this will be a transparent and process and go through the public hearing process if we decide to go forward with any zoning bylaw changes, just so people know that.
is there any way we can get like looking at Rehoboth or another town, and get
Yeah.
like a hypothetical, what it would look
There's
like?
plenty, you can go to any town website, you go to Hanover's website, you go to Hanson.
Yeah, I just want,
Yeah,
ones
most of
who
them,
actually have it.
well, most of them do.
Okay,
Well, I think what you're saying is the overlay example,
right, right.
which most towns don't.
Yeah.
What you're referring to is just what most towns do have, which is just in their general use table, they've got some type of a public utility category.
But we don't have use tables. What we have is we have the uses allowed in each zoning district.
Right, yep,
Defined in each, and that's been problematic for a long time.
yeah. I've seen that format in some communities.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess I want to, and we're all for transparency. We know that there would, if this advances, there'd be public hearing, one or more public hearing, and, you know, we're happy to answer the questions that, especially that you were noting with respect to noise, visual mitigation. We fully anticipate that this property, to the extent feasible, that there would be some type of screening, whether it's a combination of arborvitae, landscape buffer, distance buffer, or some type of opaque fencing or decorative fencing, that type of an element to preserve, especially residential abutters. I want to just make sure I understand the process, though, because again, every town is a little bit different with respect to their warrants. And I know that January 27th is the next available meeting, but I also know that I believe that the warrant period begins February 3rd, and it
Closes.
closes soon thereafter.
10th? 14th. Yeah, it's a short window.
Okay, so our real goal is, regardless of which path the board wants to take on this, whether it's overlay or just creating a sort of a blanket category for the, that applies to all districts, we want to make sure that we're not gonna miss that warrants window. So am I to understand that if the board tonight decides to continue this discussion, to continue this meeting to the next meeting, January 27th, that at that meeting, hopefully between now and that time, we will have talked to your, maybe Sue and town administrator, town council, get feedback with respect to their input on a direction, and that at the January 27th meeting, if all goes well, and that the staff agrees on a path, then that could be voted on by this board, and that would at least get us a spot within the warrant in time.
Yes.
How would that work with public hearings?
Well, the town meeting is until May. So we've got
So
plenty
we
of
would
time
vote
between
on
the end
it.
of, once the warrant closes and the May town meeting, we've got plenty of time to hold public hearings.
But would we be able to make changes after holding a public hearing?
Well,
Like, I think we're asking to come up with the verbiage prior
Yes.
to having
Well,
a town.
that's my other question.
Yeah.
Yeah, are we
I
coming
think
up
we'd
with
wanna
the
be-
verbiage before we have a?
I think we'd want to be pretty solid on what we wanted to present for the town warrant by the 14th. We'd want that pretty well screwed down.
Oh, by the 14th of February?
February.
Okay,
yeah.
all right, not the 27th.
And we have another,
No, the 27th of January, we'd say, okay, this is the path we want to take. We don't want to do overlay, we want to do a general, we have a choice between those two right now, and I think we want to land on one or the other of those.
Okay.
Once we do that on the 27th, then we have time to get that kind of narrowed down, the language and everything else that would be put before town meeting.
Right, yeah, and that would be plenty of time to do that by the 14th of February. And the real thing I want to make sure of is that the National Grid would not have to do a citizen's petition. This was all through the planning board.
Right, it would be local, it would be
Planning board
locally done.
would
Yeah.
sponsor it, okay. Okay. And
And
can I
the-
ask, who is the town council?
KP Law.
What's the individual's name?
Well, it's KP Law, so
Oh.
they've got several individuals who work with us.
Okay,
Generally, Carolyn Murray works with us on zoning bylaw changes.
great.
and Andy, am I correct? Because I think this is where Heather was going. If after public hearings, we don't want to even support it, even though it's already going to be on the warrant, we could always say that at town meeting, right? That the
Yes.
planning board does not support this warrant item.
Yes.
If that is how we felt after the public hearing.
Can
Okay.
we withdraw it from the warrant?
What?
Can we withdraw it from the warrant?
I-
That's all to be decided by us at,
Right.
you know, I
Yeah.
mean, it's premature to decide.
Let's see what we got before we start figuring out how to kill it.
Yeah, It's not a good idea to present a zoning bylaw change, to
Yeah.
the planning board to present a zoning bylaw change that
That we
doesn't,
don't support.
that you don't support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
All right, so just so I'm clear, the next step is, you guys are putting together an overlay district?
No,
wording, or
the next step is for us to talk to town council about the two paths before us, an overlay or a general,
Yeah, okay.
and then at our 27th meeting to pretty much decide which path we want to take. And at that point, we'll get something ready for the warrant.
So we're gonna have somebody in here before the 27th. We're gonna have another meeting?
We're going to have another meeting on the 27th. That's when we're, between now and the 27th, with Sue and KP Law,
Okay,
we'll talk about this.
okay.
And then we have another meeting in February, February 10th. So we have another one before the warrant closes.
We do.
So if for some reason we need to make changes before
Yeah.
the 14th, we'd have that time. Perfect.
So on the 27th, we're gonna have the two options in front of us.
Yeah, well, pretty much, we're going to have council, we would have had information from council saying, hey, we really recommend you go down this path.
Okay.
January 27th, and then the next planning board meeting is when?
March,
February 10th.
February 10th, sorry.
February 10th, okay. The planning board needs to vote, essentially, to sponsor before the 14th, before the warrant closes.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I think that's it for now. Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, great. Rob, did you have any? You good? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Well, we got a couple of other things on the agenda, routine administrative matters. We can vote minutes. Is everyone taking a look at the minutes? These would be the minutes of December 2nd, 2024.
I'll make a motion
And then we'll discuss it.
to approve the minutes for December 2nd, 2020.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Heather?
No, I'm
Aye.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim? Alicia?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. All right.
So, he has a question. Wanted to make sure that I need to reach out to council.
Yes.
I'm gonna get their recommendation, and then on the 27th, we'll discuss it.
Exactly.
He was under the impression that there was gonna be a separate meeting prior to that.
No, no. We'll talk to council. We don't need to have a meeting to talk to council. I don't think, does the board want to, I mean, if council recommends that we go one way over the other, do you have any issues with that?
No, as long as they explain why.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, my only concern is with the utility, I mean, there was a number of questions that were asked tonight about, mitigation. And just a number of questions can come up, especially with these more unique types of facilities, that sometimes even town councils are not aware of. Like the TPU process, most town councils are not aware
Well,
of
we
that
can
at
have
all.
them talk to you,
Well, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. I was thinking
but we don't
myself,
need to do it in a meeting.
not in a meeting, no.
No.
I thought we would do this offline. I would talk to council,
Sure.
maybe with you, and,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
Sorry, who approved the minutes?
We approve the minutes.
Who was first?
I motioned.
I second.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else that we need to do tonight?
No, the only thing I wanted to mention is that I printed out the master plan, and everyone has a copy, which is on the table behind Heather.
Woo-hoo.
Excellent.
Exciting.
All right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second?
All right. Roll call vote. Heather?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Jim? Alicia?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
And I'm aye. Thank you very much.
Can I just sleep